So here we are. I am joined today by the amazing Chris Roe,
Thank you,
herbalist.
Eli.
How are you, Chris?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
Excellent.
On a bright day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you just dropped in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, just bear with me a minute. Right. Okay. So, I'm not sure whether that recorded or not. So,
Okay, so we're starting again.
I'm here with the lovely
Perhaps.
Chris Roe today. This is the fourth in the series of the 45 interviews in the 45 days, 45 minutes, 45 speakers. And I am very grateful for the lovely Chris Roe, herbalist, to be joining me today in person. Slightly
Well,
different
thank you, Eli.
Slightly different
And I'm
format.
very pleased to be here.
Excellent. This is great. So, Chris and I have just been playing around with Zoom, and we both agree that we look like an 80s pop duo who've grown old together. So I don't know if anybody
Yeah,
agrees on
we
that.
thought perhaps the Pet Shop Boys.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So I don't know whether anybody agrees with that, but so we're going to do this interview, and for anybody who doesn't know Chris, he is an absolutely fantastic herbalist, naturopath, and medicine man, forager, and grower.
And grower.
Amongst other things, philosopher, lover.
Stop it.
Chris, I'd just like to ask you, how are you and what's on your mind?
Well, I'm very well. What is on my mind? I actually had quite an interesting conversation with someone who I met someone this afternoon, and she's written books on Celtic herbs. Celtic herbs and something else as well. And anyway, yeah, she told me she's writing a book on Renaissance herbalism.
Wow.
And I was talking to her about tinctures, and I've begun to make my tinctures in a very certain way. And she actually told me that the Renaissance herbalists were doing the same thing. So I was
So are you sort of
kind of interested by that.
embodying
Well,
the
I mean,
Renaissance
actually, the
through
reason
your
I've
work?
gone that way is it's actually an American herbal school that was going end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. I've had quite a long interest in them because they had a very specific way of using their herbs. And they really knew their herbs. In fact, if you go on the net, you can find there was a self-reporting that they did in the 1920s when they had to treat the so-called Spanish flu, and they had a very good success rate, whilst the regular doctors, I don't think, did. And they were using pretty powerful herbs that not a lot of people dare use, but they really had a very sure hand. They had a kind of specific symptom picture for every herb, and they really knew when to use that herb. And they were very strong on that. They were treating the picture that they saw in the person, not the so-called name of the illness that they had. And that is something that is ongoing today. You know, we talk a lot of treating somebody in a holistic way, but quite often we do get dragged into just treating arthritis, you know, names for a condition rather than going to the specific person and seeing actually what's going on for them. And that is kind of the art of herbs as far as I see it.
So it's energetic.
Yes.
Energetic healing.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, it seems today, I mean, the Chinese herbs and the Ayurveda, that's the strongest tradition that is alive to today. But we used to have our own kind of a Western system. And I've always been interested to bring the Western style kind of back into use. And yeah, so they were using a kind of basic formula of sedate, excite, relax, or tone. And yeah, and then they had specific herbs that would work in those kinds of ways. But at the same time, there was the kind of new science starting. They were starting to learn about the kind of the kind of autonomic nerves. So the kind of science of the sympathetic and stuff like that was starting to play in, and they had a very good understanding, I think, of health and how it related to somebody's mental health as well. And that again is, I think, where we really need to focus on, of how to key into herbs, because I think, as we found from Dr. Barg, what we're ultimately trying to treat is the specific mental sort of outlook, which then starts to play out in terms of an illness. So that's what I'm interested in trying to do, and I don't think I've kind of mastered it, but it's where I'm at with herbs.
It's interesting because that's got a parallel with the kind of the lost Celtic tradition, with the lost Celtic tradition of inner work that people like Mark Keane is discovering in the Welsh poems. There seems to be a whole lost tradition of Celtic knowledge and Western knowledge that's been pushed away, and we very much sometimes go to the East for our spiritual guidance, when actually we've got all those traditions here. You know, that's something which is really exciting for me, that you're tapping into that. So how does that practically translate into your work? Have you started using different herbs from different traditions over here? Or, I mean, you're obviously indigenous herbs here, but are you bringing things over from America?
I do use quite a lot of American herbs. I mean, obviously there are quite a few that have come over anyway. So there's, I mean, I suppose Echinacea is the one that's most well known. And I mean, that seems to be learnt from the American Indians. And then there are a few other herbs. Trying to think. There's a species of cherry that we use quite a lot. Although I found that our own native ones are as good. There's quite a lot of stronger. There's poke root actually, which is very good as a lymphatic, and that's commonly used today. And I mean, generally the English herbalists, I think, maybe because of the language, they've been more there was the European influence of herbs that was going over to the States, and then it came back again. I mean, I did read quite an interesting article on Physio Medicalism being used in the middle of Bristol in the 19th century. So you had a kind of American herbal school that was actually coming back over here and being taught here, and causing quite a lot of consternation, because what was going on there, of course, was you had the kind of regular doctors, and they were fighting it out with the herbalists. And
is that a common thing?
Well, I mean, that kind of hasn't gone away. So Culpepper in the 17th century was translating the Latin pharmacopoeia much to the consternation of the doctors, and at the same time writing little footnotes that were quite rude about the doctors, about how they took a lot of cash and they didn't really know what they were doing. And that story seems to have continued.
On a bigger scale, maybe.
Yeah, and then what you found with the Eclectics is they were doing the same thing. They were vying with the regular doctors, and it was only with the incoming of the chemical medicine. And I was reading about this about 10 years back, and I kind of found out that there was a Rockefeller fund to fund the College of the Chemical Medicine. And suddenly that grew, and the Eclectics were kind of left behind, but they were still there in the background right until the 1950s.
Who were those people? And where did they exist? Were they around the West, or were they
They were basically American.
Yeah.
I think they kind of grew out of a kind of sort of far west of America, kind of on the frontiers.
Yeah.
Where folk just had to deal with things
with
quickly, and they were dealing with frontline things the whole time, so they really knew how to act fast. And sort of, yeah, I mean, I think, today when we work with herbs, we tend to work with someone that, we're not having to work with someone who might be about to die. And that's what they had to do back then. And I think through having to do that, they really knew their stuff. But then when they were being trained as well, I mean, I've seen like a picture of the school, and there was actually, a huge block next door, and there were ill folk that were in there, and they would be going around and they would treat them.
Wow.
And as a herbalist today, we don't really get that kind of interaction, and we don't get that kind of surefire having to work with someone who
is in
you
trouble.
Really have to know what you're going to do, and you have to do it fast.
That's interesting.
And some of us are starting to think that we might have to see that again.
Yeah. Well, on that point, Chris, interestingly enough, I've had two people in my life over the last couple of weeks who have said to me, who've taken the unmentionable, and they've asked me if there's anything that I can do for them, which is really interesting. And I've literally passed them on to protocols that certain people have put on the internet, and they've gone away and done it. And I don't know whether that's actually, I trust the people who've done that, but it is a very immediate thing. And I think more and more of that's coming on. So, maybe we're seeing more of a sort of an instant repository of different treatments that you can put on, and give out on the fly type thing. So
I mean, the thing that I found is I've looked at quite a lot of the protocols that are starting to come out for the unmentionable, and there isn't an awful lot of talk about herbs actually. There's the kind of general, there's the pine, and maybe the turmeric, but I kind of haven't heard an awful lot more, and it'd be good to hear a little bit more about that.
Have you had any experience of looking at your work and seeing what might work? Because it's a tricky, it's a tricky field, obviously, but the pine needle tea seems to be the one for,
I mean, again, it is about coming back to not treating the unmentionable, but treating how that person is reacting to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was Amanda Vollmer I once saw speaking, and one thing she did say, which really struck a chord with me, was the first thing to treat is what was it about that person that allowed that to come into their bloodstream in the first place.
Wow.
And I think that's very strong. There's a kind of some kind of an energetic hole there, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen lots of pressure from family, be it from parents or be it from kids as well to their parents.
Yeah.
Um,
So in terms of, because I love your work, Chris, and you're very deep with your work, and you seem to be bringing things out into the open that people didn't necessarily see before, and working in ways that is much more community based. Is there any what one thing would you say to people who wanted to get into becoming more involved with herbs and herbalism? What would you suggest that they do? Go foraging?
Yeah. I mean, I think.
How did I know that?
Yeah. I mean, and I mean that is part of it. It is reconnecting with nature and going out there and to kind of hear about a plant, find out what that plant looks like, and go and find it.
Yeah,
that is a journey in itself. And then to pick some of that herb, and I think sometimes folk get stuck. Oh, there's a tincture to make. I don't know how to do it. But you can literally grab a handful and you can chop it up and you can pour some vodka on top, or just make a tea.
Yeah. Making a tea, that's a really powerful thing. I know I just go out into my garden and pick nettles or mint and sage, purple sage I've got, which I make tea, and it's just such a simple, easy, beautiful thing to be able to do. And it's very accessible, actually. It's incredibly accessible for your own health.
And it's something that I can actually forget to do as well, and sort of doing stuff, and then to sit down and just grab some lemon balm or something and make something that's not black tea, and it's just, I mean, it's a great thing to do. But and I think also that going out into nature and starting to look at plants, and starting to learn about them. And I think I was about 30 when I started to study formally. But I mean, up until that time, I was self-taught. I mean, I just grabbed a wildflower book and just started to look at things, And I mean, it is amazing sort of what you find,
I know on one of the walks we went on, you took us to a piece of wasteland, and that was absolutely mind-blowing, because it's like, oh, we're going to go into this wasteland now, guys. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And you pulled out like 10 or 12 different things, including I think a big pile of comfrey that was just sat there.
Right.
And there was all sorts of other things, and you showed,
I mean,
it was really
wasteland is brilliant, actually. I mean, there is, because it's often quite poor, there might be concrete that started to break down and just little herbs coming up. And quite often you see things coming out of the old concrete that you wouldn't see in a like a field somewhere. So there's something of the kind of poorness of the soil that actually does attract certain herbs, particularly vervain, which is an ancient sacred herb of the Druids, I think.
Yes, it is, for sure. So do you cultivate a wide range of herbs for yourself?
I used to. I'm kind of going back to that, but finding the balance between the cultivation. I've been growing quite a lot from seed. The cultivation and the making of the tinctures and the treating the people, and I sometimes find any one of those parts can slip away. I mean, I kind of have had this sort of want to kind of have a nursery with all the herbs there, because I mean, actually now it's actually quite hard to get hold of quite a lot of these things. So, I mean, I used to buy seeds from the States. I'm not able to now. Yeah.
Do you feel that we should have some sort of, I don't know what you call it, but a library, almost like a catalogue, somewhere where you could actually, a lot of people could go. And is there anywhere like that in the southwest? Is there anywhere? Would you like to see something like that? That somebody opens up their land and says, "Here you go, grow a whole cornucopia of herbs," and
well,
I
I think there are things like that happening. I think there are quite a lot of food herb growers around the place. Yeah, I think I have got my sights set on quite a few herbs that aren't used anymore, and I'd like to see them sort of re-brought into practice. Yeah, and I'm, if you search around amongst the nurseries, you can find some weird and wonderful stuff. But yes, I would like to see a decent nursery that could provide sort of everything that we might not want, because I think it is very hard to get. Certainly you haven't been able to get live plants from abroad for quite a long time.
Is that just like law? Well, not law, legal.
Yeah, it's biosecurity.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's there to keep you safe.
Of course it is. I forgot. We need to be told what's right and what's wrong. Slipped my mind for a moment there.
Yeah. I'm very pleased to be kept safe and not be able to buy the things that I want to grow.
That's it. Oh, it's great. It's great to be able to laugh at these things because it's so absurd, isn't it? It really is. Well, all I can say, for the people out there now, if anybody's got any land and if anybody's got any money who wants to donate to the cause, then please leave details in the comments. And we'll go and grow, a field full of incredibly rare herbs.
Well, I think really what I would say is that, if anyone, would like to be growing herbs, it is very simple. And, perhaps, that might be a good time to bring in a few top 10 herbs to grow, perhaps. Yeah.
Go for it. Go on, Chris. Give us your top 10.
Go on, let's say.
There's different top 10s, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
So okay. Here's one for you. I did have a very physical job, and sometimes I used to drive a lot, and my feet used to be sore. What kind of herbs would you, if I said to you, look, I've got really achy feet. I wake up in the morning, they're a bit stiff. What kind of balm would you?
We'd probably go for some Comfrey, really. Which is found out. There's a fair amount of it around. It grows on the levels a lot around here. But you can put a root in your garden, and once that's grown for a year or two, it's going to be hard to get out of your garden. So be warned. But you can make a great balm out of that.
What's the number one? What do you think? If you had to, I love it. I love this sort of thing because it really pushes people to think about, what they'd have in their house and what they would do. Because at the end of the day, Chris, somebody might just say, you know what, I'm going to do what Chris says.
Can I have five number ones?
You can have 5 number ones. Go on then. That's perfect.
Okay, well, let's
5 number ones.
Let's start with lemon balm.
Yeah. And why?
Because a lot of this is about staying conscious. It's about staying centered.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Lemon balm is antidepressant. Slightly. It's good for anxiety. And you can grow it in your garden. Some people complain because it spreads, but I think that's really good. And you can make fresh tea out of it, and I've always said when I make a tincture out of it, to pick quite a lot when I'm chopping it up, and so I'm kind of with it for some hours, imbued in the smell of it, and I'll come out of that and I'll be doing something else. I think I've gone to lemon balm land. And there is a certain thing about it.
It's a firm number one then.
Yeah,
brilliant. Excellent. So your second number one.
How about Elecampane?
Okay, go for it.
It's meant to be a native, although I think I've only once seen it actually growing wild.
Yeah.
It's your primary lung tonic.
Interesting.
It's aromatic, but it's got similar some of the nutrient substances found in kind of echinacea. It's in the daisy family, so it's sort of and it contains certain starches which seem to be immunostimulating or whatever it is, which is probably just means that they work on the gut health actually. It's lovely and aromatic, so it kind of gets into the chest and it helps you breathe. It's good on the stomach as well. Lovely lung herb. How about hawthorn?
It's got to be.
Yeah, because it's your heart herb.
Yeah.
But it's not just for the heart. It's actually very good for ADHD. And the idea there is that the heart in Chinese medicine is the house of the Shen, or the spirit. So by helping to tone the heart, you're actually helping that to be the house of the spirit. So it helps to sort of ground the spirit. And I mean, it has been used to fairly good effect, I hear, for kids, you know, who are a bit kind of manic, which probably just means they're bored.
But very powerful, and you can grow it in a hedgerow.
Very powerful, and yes, I think, you know, it's the kind of number one herb that springs to mind with the kind of epidemic that we're having amongst the footballers and so forth.
It's a fortifier, is it not?
Yeah, I mean it helps with circulation to the heart. It also helps with cardiovascular health. So it's good for kind of arteriosclerosis.
Can I just, in the middle of your number ones, could you just talk about Japanese knotweed just for a moment?
Japanese knotweed.
I just need to throw it in there.
Well, it's in the dock family. I've always, I mean, I'm just going to move on to dock a little bit, because dock's my sort of anchor for this. I always struggled with dock because we were taught it was a laxative, which I don't find it really does that at all. It does seem to work on the lower bowel, and it is actually probably better for diarrhea. But what it actually is it's kind of cooling. So in Chinese medicine, you'd call that sort of damp heat. And I think the Japanese knotweed is working somewhere similar. I mean, of course, the thing with dock as well is it's a blood cleanser. It's getting into the tissues. It's starting to pull things out. Japanese knotweed is doing the same sort of thing, and there's a sort of sour taste in there. And the sour taste is often things that can be kind of immunomodulating in a way that's actually reducing the kind of immune response a little bit. So I've seen it in protocols for Lyme's disease. And of course, all of these herbs that are invaders.
It's so interesting, that, isn't it?
I mean, I was actually reading today about someone who works in Norway who started a Facebook page for ground elder, which is also known as goutweed, and he's trying to have a campaign where we don't hate it as much, because you know, I mean, it is a weed, and it, you know, it can get into your garden and it spreads everywhere. It is also quite good for gout, and it is actually quite a good vegetable as well. And I mean, with the Japanese knotweed, it makes nice flowers, and yes, it is an amazing herb. And it can be used as a raw food as well, so you can pick the young shoots in spring and you can fry them or something, or steam. I think it might want to be steamed. It's more sour, actually.
Is it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I think, I mean, basically it's a blood cleanser. And that's probably what's going on with the limes. It's kind of maybe getting into the tissues and bringing stuff out.
It's interesting how, you know, Mother Nature provides all this, a huge amount of remedies, and actually we've kind of been separated from that.
yeah.
Like the whole of society, almost very small amount of people really understand and know how these natural remedies are all around us. And if we had a little bit of everything all the time, it would be absolutely amazing.
And they do say that what you need grows on your doorstep. I mean, another interesting story of the sort of invasive plants is Himalayan balsam, which is the Impatiens of the bark flower. And when Bach actually came up with that particular remedy, I think it was fairly rare. And I mean, it is like the name says, it's for when we're trying to rush around a bit too much. And of course, now you see it everywhere. It's completely mental. So, there does seem to be like a pattern. It's like, here's the thing that you need. So it is worth to have a look on your doorstep and just see what's growing on your doorstep and then find out about it. This is part of where I want to be going with the herbs. It's partly about being able to treat people, but it's also about the kind of education of to help other people to get out there and just learn for themselves.
It's interesting, the dandelion. I didn't really realize until this year how rounded that plant is and how much it can offer us, on many different levels. The fact that you can eat all of it, is absolutely incredible. You can just eat it all. That's amazing. And we treat it as something which is completely invasive, but actually it's one of the first things to grow. So the bees love it, and the seeds are used for divination, for making wishes, which is a lovely playful thing. So the simple dandelion just really is such a beautiful thing.
And I mean, the thing that comes to me with her herbs like that is, I've been to herb school and I've learnt them, and you sort of get an idea of how that particular herb works. And then every year I find, I meet other people saying, oh, but I use it for this and for that and for that. And, it can be really easy to oversimplify a herb because they're very, they don't work like a drug. And I think sometimes we're trying to use them as drugs. And they're kind of multifaceted and they're kind of amphoteric, which means that they balance. I mean, there's quite a lot to be said of Hawthorn. It can raise the blood pressure, but it can also lower it. So it tends to do maybe what you need at the time, rather than the drug, which is just saying do that, raise, or lower. So a lot of herbs do work like that, and then those stronger herbs, which are in a way more drug-like, and the ones that you have to take a bit more care with, those do work a bit more like drugs.
So your fourth number one.
Oh yeah, my fourth number one. Maybe Betany.
Wow. Okay. What is Betany? Never heard of it.
Betany, wood Betany. It's another herb like lemon balm in the mint family. It's a herb for the head.
What?
It can be quite often used for head wounds. There's a really lovely story. Matthew Wood, who's someone that I've learned a lot from about herbs, he actually says it's for people that have been abducted by flying saucers, which sounds a bit obscure.
Yeah. But that's good.
But
I like it.
His reasoning is those sort of people, they tend to be maybe a bit sort of open.
Yeah.
So they're having kind of experiences that maybe they kind of don't need to be having.
Right.
So and what he actually says is it works on the solar plexus.
I see.
So it's to do with the kind of enteric brain, they call it. Like, I think some people have heard quite a lot about the heart and the way the heart can think.
Yeah.
But there is also a kind of another brain that's relating in to the digestive system, and that seems to be the seat of our kind of instincts and also our kind of sense of self. So with the Betany, it's quite a good herb to use for that. It's kind of using it to sort of sharpen off your kind of close down holes in your sense of self. So, and quite often it might be people with a history of abuse. So the abuse has kind of caused particular damage to their sense of self. But then, of course, so sort of a less kind of esoteric level. It's kind of when stress is starting to impact on the digestion, which can happen a lot. Yeah, there are a lot of nice herbs in the mint family that are good for mental health things.
That's really good to know, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, mint tea is very it's kind of got a lightness, but it also it raises you, doesn't it? When you have spearmint or you smell mint, it does raise you. It brings you to a higher kind of clarity.
Well, I mean, it's actually really interesting that you mention mint, actually, because I think that's one that's not often indicated for emotional stuff, but I think it does work very well in that way. And because of its strong action on the stomach, and it's used quite a lot on the lungs and stuff like that, we maybe forget that it is very good for kind of emotional states. It's sort of maybe a little bit more stimulating than some of the other herbs, but that's quite often what you want. You want something to raise you to kind of what you need to do rather than to sort of bring you down. So I mean, I've been working with a gemmotherapist, actually. Gemmotherapy is a sort of fairly new thing to the herb world, where they use the tree buds, and she's really going in deeply about using very, very low doses, and really keying out the specific kind of emotional kind of indications for each tree, and that's been really amazing to see someone starting to kind of key into that kind of work. I mean, I mean, obviously, bark is the same, but I mean, I think that's where we really need to be going with herbs, is sort of, I think seeing medicine as part of a kind of esoteric or a kind of evolution into the spirit. So I mean, after all, we have to ask kind of what is health, and if we don't have an idea of actually why we're alive and what we're doing, so I think in a way, when we're working with health, we're working with why do we want health? It's not just like, oh, I'm well now so I can drink beer and smoke fags. It's I'm well now and I've worked into a slightly deeper, more of a sensitive work, and then as you do that, you'll get to another imbalance, and then you'll work with that. So I think that's kind of where we're going with it.
It's interesting you say working with the buds, because that is that's a very new energy, isn't it? It's a very powerful new energy. So it feels right that should be coming on now, because obviously we're going into this phase of new beginnings, and I'd be really interested to find out where that goes and what you do with that, because working with buds, that is very specific, and it looks very clear and clean, and it is it seems to have you know, a longevity as well. It's something which is new and fresh, and you know, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is part of it. I mean, as much as I'm interested in keying into older stuff, I think, you know, there is the new as well. And I think that's partly where we're at. And, you know, perhaps as we find the new, we see the wisdom in the old. But yeah, you know, it's not just about sort of going back to the old, but it's about, you know, maybe understanding that these crazy ideas that they had in the old days are not quite as bad as we
they're
thought they
completely
were,
true,
but
and
we just can't see it. You know.
Well, there is definitely remembering going on, you know, and there's a rediscovery, and I think that's quite exciting, you know, especially for people, you know, outside of the kind of practitioner herbal world, you know, for people like myself who are just discovering, you know, that there is this whole array of things that we can use that's just literally around us, you know, and I think that, you know, your work is tapping into that, and, you know, and educating people into that is fantastic. Your fifth number one, Chris.
Have I not only
No.
done 3?
Well, you did touch on bark, and you did talk about buds, but
what,
one more.
What I did want to say actually was
Yeah,
I was
go
going
for
to
it.
bring in this is maybe the darling of the gemmotherapy world actually,
Yeah.
which is blackcurrant.
Yes, I love blackcurrant.
Yeah, I mean it's great. I mean what they say, and this isn't so much in the kind of emotional kind of stuff, but they say that blackcurrant as a gemmotherapy can be used whenever you would use an antihistamine or a steroidal type thing.
Wow.
So whenever you're trying to kind of modulate the immune system, which is maybe overreacting in some way,
Yeah.
it will help to cool it all down.
Wow.
So I've used it with good success for hay fever.
Pet allergies?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Pollen?
mean, you know, you can't guarantee
No.
it's going to work exactly
No.
with every person, but for pollen or for pets.
It's interesting, isn't it, with the blackcurrant, because it is right in our psyche still. You know, if you think about it, you know, Ribena, I'm thinking of. You know, and also, you know, it's used in a lot of sweets, and you get, you know, it is right there, and it seems to me very English. I know that sounds a bit, but you know,
yeah, I think it is in a way.
it feels English. I remember as a kid going into people's gardens and there being blackcurrants. I haven't seen many recently, but you know, it's definitely abundant, isn't it, and around and available, you know. So
and of course it does feel very mean in the spring to pick the buds.
yeah.
And if you haven't got many shrubs, you may not want to do that, and you can just use the leaf.
Yeah.
Or I mean, yeah, I mean the fruit as well. I mean, you're seeing in the color of the fruit and the taste of the fruit, again, that's kind of sour, and it's going to be reducing things. So it's, you know, it's going to cool things down. And you know, I mean, as a summer berry, you know, it's something that we
I can see it
eat
now.
in the heat.
I can see it now.
Yeah.
You know, in that bowl.
Blackcurrant sorbet, you know, that's going to cool things down, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So Chris, we're coming to the end of our time, which is, you know, we're going to do a part 2. I'm sure we'll do a part 2, but I just we definitely should. Yeah. It's been really good fun, and I just want to ask you what are the attendees of the celebration going to see when they turn up? I know you've got your own tent. What are you bringing to the party?
Lots of alcohol. Well, yes, but
very, very beautifully made alcohol
in the form of tincture.
Correct. Yes.
For drop doses only.
Yes, that's it.
And teas. And
you're bringing your kit, right? You're going to bring your kit.
Yes.
And what is your kit? Just tell us.
Well,
what you're
I mean, my kit is mostly just sort of normal kitchen equipment. I did buy a lovely samovar actually.
Wow, what's one of those?
Well, it's sort of it's got a little no, it's not. It's got a little fire pit at the bottom, and then on top there's like a chimney that goes through. Yeah. And there's a water container with a tap, so you can have a permanent supply for making teas.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
But I will bring the copper alembic.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so I mean, basically, I'll be doing the two things that I spoke about. One is the actual treating people and how to help them with herbs, and then I'll be going out and we'll be doing workshops and herb walks, and then I'll be doing a talk as well.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm
which
loving it, Chris. It's great.
yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant.
And I would just like to say, actually, the person that I was working with the Gemmotherapy is Lauren Hubele. And you can find her work on the internet, and she's very interesting.
I'll put it in the description below.
Yeah, do it.
First time I said that. But there we go. Well, thank you for joining me, Chris.
Thank you, Eli.
I've really enjoyed it,
yeah,
and I'm really looking forward to being with you at the celebration, and we'll see you very soon.
Same here.
Cheers. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Brilliant.